from, since I don't know you very well. Let me know where you're chiming in from, Dominique, since I don't know you very well. Hello, Facebook. Welcome to this week's Ask Shelly segment. It is 11:59. We're going to get started in 1 minute. Hi again, Instagram. Hello, Facebook. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm super excited. I hope that you can tell that I love what I do. And more than loving what I do is loving serving you as your emotional intelligence expert. So we have about 1 minute before we get started. 1 minute, and we're gonna move forward. Thank you so much for those of you who are joining on Facebook. I would appreciate your shares. Get the word out to those who need to hear it. This is all about filling our wellness toolbox, right? It's all about just adding tools to our wellness toolbox to continually grow each and every day a little bit closer to a place of wholeness. That is what we are doing here. If you are on and you are joining, please say hello. Let me know where you're coming in from, where you're logging in from. It is 12 o'clock and this is the start of this week's Ask Shelly segment. My name is Shelly Fan. I am the owner and CEO, founder of Ask Shelly Consulting. I am also your emotional intelligence expert, and I love what I do. Every week, I have the privilege to share with you a question that is asked of me, and I am able to share a perspective with all of you listeners. Hopefully, it is something that you can add to your wellness toolbox, or something that you can deposit into the wellness toolbox of those that you love. Hi, Gina. Thank you for logging in. Thank you so much for your support as you come in. Share. So again, I am an emotional intelligence expert. What we do at Ask Shelly is just take large and small businesses, corporations, families, and individuals to their next level by the provision of psychoeducation. So last night, in the wee hours of the night, early wee hours of the morning, I had the privilege of creating a very unique workshop for a firm. It's a legal firm of very high achieving competitive attorneys who really need to understand the psychological needs of people, the psychological needs of human beings, in order to be able to truly connect with them, because their productivity relies heavily on their consumer satisfaction, right? And so I created a workshop, or in the process of creating a workshop for them, so they can understand what those unique human needs are, and making sure that they include in their policy and procedure ways to meet those needs to get and keep clients connected, right? And so that's just one aspect of what it is I do. Today, we are highlighting a question from a listener, and I need your feedback. So if you are on, please feel free to comment. I am not doing this alone. I need my fellow experts on Facebook and Instagram to also join in on the conversation. I want to hear what it is you believe. I want to hear what you think. I want to hear your perspective. So this week's question is, Dear Ask Shelly, can you talk about the senseless loss of lives in the hands of police that are supposed to protect and serve our communities? And I want to add that this person then resubmitted the question with an addition to the first. And the second time it was the question was sent, it said, can you talk about the senseless loss of lives in the hands of racist police that are supposed to protect and serve our communities? I would love to hear your perspective on that. Again, your perspective on the senseless loss of lives in the hands of police. And this is my response. First and foremost, I have to say that I have the utmost respect for our law enforcement officers, and I'm sure that most people do. And so I have friends that are law enforcement officers. I have, yes, Gina, heavy topic. I know it's, and I would love to hear what it is that your perspective on that. And so I have frat brothers that are law enforcement officers here in Orlando. I have sorority sisters that are law enforcement officers right here in this city. I have friends that are law enforcement officers in New York City. So I do have the utmost respect for those who have chosen to put their lives on the line to serve and protect our communities. I do. And I also respect the sacrifice that their children make and the sacrifice that their loved ones make each and every day, not knowing if they will see their loved one come home again, right? And so I respect that. I respect their dedication to and commitment to justice. And I think I have a different perspective when it comes to this because of the experience that I have in treating law enforcement officers for trauma. So I get to see a different aspect and a different side of them in understanding how they are not very supported in being able to address their emotional needs, their family needs, where they feel shunned and ridiculed in order to address that. I know that we get, as you know, the community, we get somewhat of a sanitized, is what I call a sanitized perspective of their day-to-day struggles. We get a sanitized perspective of the things that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. And by the time they come to me, they're completely broken. Half the time, their families have fallen apart. They are experiencing significant trauma. And because of the experience that I have had in working with officers, I have a certain sensitivity for their plight. I have a certain sensitivity for their needs that are not necessarily being met by their superiors or their departments. So again, I have the utmost respect for our law enforcement officers, and I want to make sure I start off by saying that. The other day, I went and I bought some crabs. I bought some crabs, and for those of you who follow me on my personal page, that was before I found this amazing crab place with a dear friend of mine, Candace Blake, who took me to the best crab place in Orlando. And if you want to know, just private message me and I'll let you know where to go. But I wasn't in Orlando at that time. I was actually in Kissimmee, and I was coming home to drop some crab off to my parents' home. And I was pulled over. And I was pulled over by not one cop car, but three vehicles. 3 state troopers, 2 officers in each vehicle. Now, at that time, I was in the groove, okay? I was in the groove, my brothers and sisters, listening to not Tupac, which is usually something that I play regularly, but to Joyce Myers, which is a functional equivalent. So I'm listening to Joyce Myers and just really into the word. So I was at a different place, just spiritually and emotionally in that moment, because I really didn't know what I had done. I was just driving. I was at the red light, and I noticed that the cop had followed me a couple of lights, but I really wasn't sure. I was like, oh, okay, maybe it's just, I didn't know. I got pulled over. 3 cop cars, y'all. 2 officers in each one. And so I'm listening to Joyce Myers, and I'm in the Word. And to not be disrespectful, I did take out one of my earbuds to hear, what the officer said. Everything that he asked for, I complied. I wanted to ask, why am I being pulled over? What is the situation? What did I do? I didn't ask any of that. Gave them what they needed. They, went back. They're collaborating, doing what they do, protecting our community, I'm sure. I popped my Joyce Myers back in. I'm chilling. And, there was a moment, though, before I went into chill mode where it was like I'm going over this checklist that I often coach and counsel my son on, my black son, my non-white son, my, Haitian son, right? The things that I coach him to say and do to make sure that he is, that his interactions are as fruitful and compliant as possible when it comes to our authority. So I'm going through that right now. Don't get out the car, keep your hands, seen, don't reach for anything. I'm going through this. And then afterward, I just kind of laid back again and just kind of rested in the fact that I knew that I wasn't in the wrong for anything, or else I didn't think so. And just continued to listen to Joyce Myers. About 15 minutes later, I thought it took a really long time. Gentleman comes back to the car, lets me know that the lights surrounding my license plate were out. And so he just wanted to make sure that I knew that I needed to get that replaced and everything was good. I go home and I started to think on my way home, why did that take 3 cop cars and 6 officers to do that? But I had to also think to myself and make sure that I was able to also address the fact that I don't know all of the circumstances, right? Maybe they were looking for someone that drives a navy blue Cadillac Escalade. I wouldn't know that. And so pulling me over was just a part of their duty to continue to protect and serve our community. I don't know that. I don't know what the reasoning is. All I can do is trust that it was needed at that time. I find great sorrow in sitting with my son and having to kind of go over these things with him. You know, don't put your hands in your pocket. Make sure you always have your ID. Say sir, madam, be kind, be this, don't run, don't, you know, not that I shouldn't be teaching him, but I just feel like the reasoning behind that, right? The reason why I have to coach him and teach him is because I need him to come home alive. And that is birthed out of the numerous senseless deaths that we have observed, that we've read about, that we have seen in the news time and time again, to those who are already disadvantaged as a result of demographics, as socioeconomic status, race, what have you. And so because of that, you know, I feel like I need to do this to make sure that he comes home alive every day. And so again, this is coming from the reality that we have had situations where those who are in a position to protect and serve have done so in a way that has been kind of senseless and drastic and have cost us very, very precious lives and have done so with very little accountability or consequence. That is the truth of the matter. Right? And so because I'm not a political expert, I wanted to make sure that I was able to give a political perspective and also a psychotherapeutic perspective to this question. So hello, those of you who are joining on Instagram, thank you so much. We're talking about senseless loss of lives in the hands of police officers. So I reached out to the ultimate political expert that I know. I don't know if she wants me to quote her, but she said this so eloquent. Listen, guys, I know that we are upset about this. We get angry about it. It hurts when we read it. It hurts when we have, when we're in the position where we have to comfort people that we love, or we have to explain to our children what's trending in the news and what's breaking news on CNN. But when you go on Facebook and you are venting and you are cursing and you are upset and we are down talking our elected officials and our leadership on many different levels, it does no thing. It does nothing. What we have to do is make sure that we sit at the table, because if we don't sit at the table, we will not get on the menu. That's a quote from this amazing political figure, and I'm going to read her response to you guys now. And so again, we have to make sure that we are engaging in the development of policy, that we are at the table. We have to assure that what we do makes sense and what we do has power, and getting engaged in the development of policy in your community, in your region, in your state, region, local, national, whatever it is, we have to get connected in order to make a change to the things that we often complain about. I don't mind people using social media as a forum to vent, but it does no thing. I want to read something and we were going back and forth about this question, and I wanted to make sure that I addressed it in a balanced manner, to be very real about it, and to also assure that it was impactful. So for me to join in on that's wrong and these racists this and that, and it does nothing, because it continues to happen, and we're going to address it from a psychological, psychotherapeutic perspective of why it continues to happen. But I want to read her response. And again, this is to the response to the question. The question was, can you talk about the senseless loss of lives in the hands of racist police that are supposed to protect and serve our communities? And she writes, we are not present, counted, or heard in decision making that matters making that matters on local levels. Let me go back. It says, we are not present, counted, or heard in decision making that matters on local levels. That is why changes are made that affect our children, and we know nothing about it until it is too late. As it relates to the specific question asked, issues related to race relations in police departments, all are issues of policy that can be changed if enough pressure is put on elected officials and policy makers. This is another reason that it is so important that we have the right elected officials in office, which is why it is important to vote, which is why it is important to vote, which is why it is important to vote. Most changes that have been made related to policing and policy that protect our communities come as a result of community advocacy and mobilization of communities. We must be part of the conversation so that we make sure our voices are heard. Complaining in the background, social media, not speaking out, and not sharing our experiences is actually what will guarantee that nothing will change. The only way that we have hope is if we are a part of the process on all issues. I am not only talking about the issues that are clearly Black issues, but all issues. Our country's population is rapidly diversifying. Already, more than half of all babies born in the United States are people of color. By 2030, the majority of young workers will be people of color. And by 2044, the United States will be a majority people of color nation. So looking at all those policies that will impact us as a people of color is extremely important. Racial and income inequality is already high and persistent. Wages have stagnated for the majority of workers, and many people of color face racial and geographic barriers to accessing economic opportunities. We have to be a part of the process, and as they say, if you are not at the table, you are not on the menu. If you are not at the table, you are not on the menu. Gina says, yes, we must get involved in our productive way to have our voice heard and appropriate action taken. And then she writes, I vote in all elections and I do my research for each candidate and amendments, etc. I also try to attend my community meetings. Yes, Gina. So that I hear what's going on in my neighborhood, local government, and state. I can't voice my concern if I don't attend the meetings and show up. This is what we need to do. When we hear of that person or we read that post that's downing our, law enforcement officers or downing our president, and so respond this way. What was the last town hall meeting you attended? Honestly, because that is where it needs to be. Let's take our anger and our frustration and be productive with it. Dr. Miles Monroe says it best. Anger is not a negative emotion. It's only negative if you don't do anything about it. Anger is only a bad emotion or a negative emotion if you allow it to eat at your life, keep you stuck, and not do something about it. That's policy. Let's talk about psychotherapy. I want to give my perspective as a licensed psychotherapist about some things that and again, we can talk about this for hours, but I want to focus on trauma and accountability. Trauma and accountability. Trauma and accountability. Cynthia, hi Cynthia. Cynthia says, that is why we need to do our part for the 2020 census. Come on. Keep writing. I want to talk more about that. Yes. She says, this is why we need to do our part for the 2020 census. Also encouraging other people to do census. Thank you so much, Cynthia. Continue to comment on that. We have Gallon Gator that says, that is where we Greek orgs have worked for us. That is where Greek orgs have worked for us. Thank you so much for that. Yes, Greek organizations, we need to step up to the plate. That was the original intention, right? Wasn't that the original intention, to change the world, one life, one family, one community at a time? Where are we? I hate complainers. I had a meeting earlier today and I just, I need action. I need action. What are you doing? And what are you doing that is productive? Okay? So I want to talk about two aspects before we close today. So I shared the political perspective, and I'm going to share more of a psychotherapeutic perspective because that is my expertise. And for those of you who were on last week and I talked about these really, really crazy lights that make me sweat, it's happening again. So I need to clearly get a portable fan because I am all ramped up right now and I feel like I've been working out. So here we go. I want to talk about trauma. Trauma is defined as anything that overwhelms our ability to cope. Sometimes when we think of trauma, we think of going to war, we think of rape, we think of really, really huge, bad, negative things. But trauma could be anything that overwhelms a person's ability to cope. Lucinda is saying, how do we address our people in our community who refuse jury duty? Ooh, if we're ever in a situation where we're a defendant in court, how can we be judged by a group of our peers if we're not represented on that jury? Oh, Lucinda. Oh, you just hit something. Because we all want to escape that, right? All of a sudden I have the flu. I'm a EMS worker, can't do it. You act like you're mentally ill and you're not qualified to be on the jury. But this is all a part of power, right, Lucinda? That's a part of power. That's a part of policy. That's a part of being in a situation where we can actually make a difference. My God, taking civic responsibility. Lucinda, it's called civic responsibility. Yes, thank you for the thumbs up, Cynthia. Civic responsibility. Okay. So trauma is anything that overwhelms our ability to cope. And as I said earlier, we have this sanitized perspective of what our police officers go through every day. They are exposed to high levels and high degree and very severe trauma on a very consistent basis, and they are re-exposed and re-exposed and re-exposed and re-injured and re-injured and re-injured. And based on the experience that I have had with law enforcement officers, I'm not going to say this is truth. I'm only going to say in my experience, in treating law enforcement officers, I have found that they often do not feel supported by their departments. They don't feel like they can say, let me take some time off. I'm hearing voices. I'm having nightmares. I can't be intimate with my spouse. I'm numb. I don't care about people. I often want to just take my weapon and kill people. I no longer have empathy. I know they can't say this because once they say this is what I've been told, they get put in a category where they are no longer able to serve and they have to surrender their weapons for a certain amount of time. And I don't know if this truly happens or if it was just perspective on what would happen if they shared their position. But the law enforcement officers that I have treated for trauma have felt completely unsupported by their departments, felt that if they ever came out to talk about their suicidal ideation, to talk about the effects of their trauma, that they would not be supported. They experience a lot of stigma and shame and guilt, and they don't talk about it. But this is the issue, because trauma causes a lot of psychological consequences such as depression and anxiety, suicidal ideation, inability to consequentially think, decision making is impacted. Trauma causes the emotional centers of our brain to be either overstimulated or completely understimulated. It affects our frontal lobe, where all those decisions are made about, this is, if I do this, this will happen. If I do this, this will happen. Consequential thinking happens in our frontal lobe. And so here we have this trauma that's being unresolved and it's not treated. And these are individuals that are sent off every day to protect and serve our communities, although they are broken and they have all of this emotional injury and baggage that they do not feel or they have not found a safe place to heal. They have not found a safe place to heal. Let me talk about trauma from a brain perspective, and I don't want to bore you guys, but when our brains are stimulated, right, and we are like in panic mode, survival mode, fight, flight, freeze, our brains are activated because we have been exposed to some type of traumatic experience or something that causes our emotions to be very extreme. And now we're like lit. We're on a scale of 1 to 10. We're at a 20, right? The brain responds in a way where we need to calm that fire down in order for us to stay alive. We need to calm this fire down in order to stay alive. We need to calm this fire down in order for us to continue to be productive, right? That is what our brain does automatically. And that brain response causes a chemical to kind of spray like a sprinkler system to kind of calm our brain down and get us thinking again, right? And that chemical reaction, that brain response is called cortisol. And so cortisol is our sprinkler system to tell the brain that, listen, let's calm this fire down and we need to be productive. Cortisol is like bleach to styrofoam. That's what cortisol is. It's like bleach to styrofoam. We need it in order to continue to be productive, but it causes holes in the outer layers of our brain. And so trauma literally causes brain damage. That brain damage messes up, screws up our emotional processing. It messes up how we think. So think about that impact. It's impacting our ability to mood regulate, our ability to think, our ability to forecast the consequences of our actions, all of the things that officers need to be able to effectively do to effectively protect and serve. So what do we need to do? What do we need to do? I think that law enforcement officers should be mandated to ongoing psychotherapeutic services. I really do. I think it should be done monthly. On a monthly basis, these amazing and honorable law enforcement officers should sit with the licensed psychotherapist, psychologist, psychiatrist, just for 90 minutes, just to process. Because if it is mandated for all, it cannot be stigmatized because we all got to do it. We all have to do it. So I think it would take away from that stigma and would give them the opportunity to sit with someone and just share. 90 minutes. That provider would be responsible for clearing the person for service for that period. So if someone didn't show up, you don't get clearance to serve, sir. If you showed up, and you participated, you get clearance to serve. If you showed up, yes, Dominique, absolutely. If you showed up and you were guarded and you were pompous and you were, then you don't get cleared. If you showed up and I saw signs of suicidal ideation, you don't get cleared. If you showed up and I, as a provider, showed signs of super optimism or themes of power and control, brokenness, unresolved trauma, depression, I, as a provider, can report to the precinct or whatever, what have you, lieutenant, whatever the chain of command is, that this person is not cleared or this person is provisionally cleared or cleared with this contingency that they report for sessions once a week for the next 12 weeks. Right? I think that we should do this. I think it should be part of policy to assure that the people that we are expecting to serve and protect our communities are as whole as they can possibly be. Gina says, great explanation of how trauma affects the brain and your thoughts on the monthly check-in. Yes, we have to be able to hold them accountable to their mental health. And if this is mandatory, then this culture, this insulated culture of we don't talk about it, or you're just expected to be tough and to continue to serve and to serve with effectiveness and excellence can go away, because guess what? You're gonna have to sit with me, officer. Yes, for 90 minutes. Can we make this 15 minutes? No, officer, I have the authority in this counseling room. Now I have the authority in this counseling room, and your ability to maintain possession of your weapon and continue to serve our community is contingent upon me saying that you're well enough to do so. How do we get that? How do we make that happen? How do we make that happen? I think that after critical incidents, and I believe this happens, and if you're an officer, if you're a law enforcement officer that's catching the replay, I'd love for you to comment on this. I think it happens, but in case it doesn't, I think that law enforcement officers after critical incidents should be mandated to sit out for a while. It doesn't have to be long. Out for a while to be able to process the incident, process emotions, process responses, get some healing in there, get them as close to wholeness as possible. I really do think that there has to be something that is mandatory after critical incidents. What is that? How would we operationally define a critical incident? It could be so many things, right? But I think that it's important that we do that. That we make sure that our officers are being exposed to a psychotherapeutic process to address how they are coping with critical incidents. Because a lot of this, knee-jerk responses to what is perceived as danger is killing our people. And whatever the reason for that is, whether it's unresolved trauma, evil, racism, whatever it is, I do think that these are things that we, accountability processes that can be put in place to address this situation. So we talked about trauma. I want to quickly talk about accountability very quickly, and we're at 12:30, so I'm going to close. So accountability, behavior happens in a chain, A, B, C. Behavior happens in a chain, A, B, C. A stands for antecedents. These are things that happen before the behavior, our emotional state, our environmental factors that are present. B is the actual behavior. These are things that we can actually observe, we can measure, that's behavior. And C is consequences. C is consequences. So listen to this, guys. And this could be 8 hours, right? I can give an 8-hour lesson on this, but I'm going to give it to you in like 1 or 2 minutes. A, B, C, antecedents, behavior, and consequence. The consequence in that chain will determine whether the B, that behavior, is strengthened or weakened. That C, which is the consequence, determines if that B, behavior, is strengthened or weakened. So without accountability and without consequences put in place, you're only reinforcing the B, the behavior. So without aversive consequences or being held accountable, the only thing that can happen is the strengthening of that behavior. Vicarious learning is this. It's a process by which, as an observer, I'm observing your A, B, and C. I'm observing your consequences. And based on what I'm observing your consequences to be, then modifies my behavior. So I think the absence of consequences and accountability psychologically has provided an allowance for others to follow suit in believing that there will be no consequences, because often we have seen these situations end without consequence or accountability. So from a behavioral perspective, the way that we have addressed these senseless murders has reinforced the idea that you can continue to serve and address situations in manners that end up in lives being lost, and it is okay, and it is accepted. Anytime we don't implement a consequence, don't ever expect the behavior to change. And that might make you really upset, right? When you think about it, when we're talking about law enforcement officers, I'm talking to you wives that don't allow or don't implement consequences for the things that you have said are non-negotiable in your marriage. I'm talking to you husbands who have declared that these are non-negotiable things, but when they happen, you accept it. I'm talking to you mom and dad that have told your kids to not do this and not do that, but you do not provide consequences that will cause the behavior to decrease or extinguish because you are not, or you have failed to consistently implement or present consequences that would assure that that behavior doesn't happen. We are all, in some way, form, or fashion, guilty of not assuring that we are responding to situations in a way that says, this is not acceptable. And from a behavioral perspective, A, B, C determines whether that behavior is strengthened or weakened. So without accountability, we will continue to see this happen over and over again, which brings us back to what we discussed at the beginning of this segment, the importance of each and every one of us taking civic responsibility to be the answer in our communities. Gallon Gator says that would be a way to check that warrior mentality. Oh yes, because if these are things that we see as psychotherapists or psychologists or psychiatrists in these sessions, we can say, you know what, we'll allow this person to continue to serve, but he needs to serve with this contingency. Once a week therapy for the next 8 weeks until someone that is credentialed is able to release that person to serve. Accountability is important, and that's for each and every one of us, which is why it's important for us to have accountability circles to make sure that we continue to every day be intentional about our self-development. Woo! That was a hot topic. Thank you so much for that person who presented that question for us. It reminds us of the importance of sitting at the table. Because if you don't sit at the table, you will not get on the menu. Remember that. Thank you for tuning into this week's Ask Shelly segment. Again, I'm Shelly Fan. I am your emotional intelligence expert. Feel free to visit me at www.askshelly.com. You can email me at info@askshelly.com. I am going to be hosting an Ask Shelly segment uncensored, and I need you to email me to say I am in. All you have to say is I am in, and I will make sure that you get that link so that you can join in on the Ask Shelly PM uncensored segment. Some of those topics that we wouldn't want the young, unsupervised ears to hear. If that's you, email info@askshelly.com saying I am in. I'll make sure you get the link and all the information that you need to join in. Thank you for allowing me to serve you. Thank you for allowing me to present my perspective. Until next time, be great, dominate, subdue the earth, and do the things that you love, because the things that you love is medicine to your soul, and it is a gift to the rest of the world. See you next week.